Have you ever wondered if an aircraft could be a total failure and a legendary success at the exact same time? It sounds impossible, a paradox of engineering and warfare. But that's the bizarre, fascinating, and often misunderstood story of the Brewster F2A Buffalo. For decades, the name Brewster Buffalo has been a punchline, a byword for a failed fighter plane. In the annals of military aviation, it's a cautionary tale often associated with the grim early days of the Pacific War. We picture a lumbering, overweight, and outclassed American fighter, a tragic death trap for the brave pilots who flew it. And in that specific context, that narrative isn't wrong. The F2A-3, the model that went to war against the Japanese, was a plane fighting with one hand tied behind its back, and its pilots paid the price. But here's the thing, that's only half the story. Because at the very same time, halfway across the world, in the frozen skies above Finland, another version of this exact same aircraft, the B-239, was being flown to legendary status. In the hands of Finnish pilots, this so-called death trap became a ruthless and highly effective killing machine, an ace-maker that racked up an almost unbelievable kill-to-death ratio against its Soviet adversaries. How can the same aircraft be a disaster in one theater of war and an unparalleled success in another? This is a question that cuts to the very heart of military history, forcing us to look beyond a weapon's raw specifications and consider its entire ecosystem. This isn't a simple story of a good plane or a bad plane. It's a story about the critical factors of weight, tactics, training, and maintenance. It's the story of the Brewster Buffalo. The story of the Buffalo begins in the mid-1930s. The U.S. Navy was looking for a new generation of monoplane fighters to replace its biplanes, and the Brewster F2A was the result of a rigorous design competition. It went up against the Grumman XF4F1, an aircraft that would eventually evolve into the legendary Wildcat. Initial tests favored the Brewster design. It was a handsome, chubby little aircraft with a robust landing gear, a powerful engine, and all the modern features of the time, including an enclosed cockpit and retractable landing gear. It was also the Navy's first monoplane fighter. Initial tests were promising, and the Navy adopted it. The first production model, the F2A-1, was a decent aircraft for its time, but by 1940, the F2A-2 entered service with more power and minor improvements. When war broke out in Europe, the Buffalo was even sold to Allied nations, including Great Britain and Finland. But as the winds of war shifted, so did the requirements for military aircraft. As the U.S. began preparing for a potential conflict in the Pacific, the Buffalo was upgraded with a number of mission-specific modifications. The F2A-3 model was born, and it was a tragedy waiting to happen. To give the pilots a better chance of survival, the plane was burdened with over 900 pounds of additional equipment, thicker armor plating to protect the pilot and engine, self-sealing fuel tanks to prevent catastrophic fires from enemy gunfire, and heavier, more robust guns and ammunition. On paper, these were all reasonable, life-saving additions. In practice, they were a death sentence for the Buffalo's performance. The added weight drastically increased its wing loading, making it less nimble and responsive. Its climb rate, once respectable, became sluggish. Its speed bled away in turns, and its energy retention became abysmal. Against its main adversary in the Pacific, the agile and lightweight Mitsubishi A6M0, the outcome was almost always the same. The Zero was a marvel of Japanese engineering, built with an almost obsessive focus on maneuverability at the expense of pilot protection. It was a stripped-down, lightweight fighter with no armor or self-sealing tanks, designed purely for dogfighting. In a classic turning dogfight, the Zero held all the cards. Its superior roll rate allowed it to initiate maneuvers more quickly, while its tighter turn radius meant it could fly comfortably inside the. When we combine a capable machine flown with a superior tactical doctrine, maintained to perfection, and piloted by well-trained aviators, the results speak for themselves. The Finnish Buffaloes achieved a staggering kill-to-death ratio of 26-1. That is not a typo. 26 enemy aircraft shot down for every single Finnish Buffalo lost. This wasn't a fluke. It was the result of a perfectly aligned system of man and machine. The story of the Brewster Buffalo confronts us with a fundamental principle of warfare. A weapon's performance depends on its entire ecosystem. Its success is forged not just in the factory, but by the skill of the pilot, the dedication of the ground crew, the brutal realities of the theater of war, and the tactical doctrines applied. It's a truth that has been proven time and again throughout history. The German Tiger tank was a fearsome machine, but its complexity and maintenance demands often rendered it useless. The Soviet T-34, while less technologically advanced, was reliable and easy to produce, and its simplicity proved to be a decisive factor. The Buffalo's legacy is a stark reminder of this principle. It was a death trap in one theater and a legendary ace-maker in another. That is the complicated and truly fascinating legacy of the Brewster Buffalo. It's a reminder that in war, nothing exists in a vacuum. A plane is only as good as the sum of its parts: the pilots, the mechanics, the tactics, and the conditions it's asked to fight in. The Buffalo proved that the right tool in the wrong hands or in the wrong conditions is useless, but the right tool in the right hands, in the right conditions, can change the course of history. If you found this deep dive into military history as fascinating as we do, please support our work. Your subscription and engagement are what allow us to continue exploring these untold stories and uncovering the hidden truths behind the history we thought we knew. Buffalo's own turn, easily bringing its cannons and machine guns to bear. A Buffalo pilot attempting to outturn a Zero was essentially committing suicide. But the fight wasn't just about agility. The weight crippled the Buffalo's energy retention. The Zero could maintain a higher service ceiling, allowing its pilots to dictate the terms of engagement, diving from above with an energy advantage that the Buffalo pilots could rarely counter. To put it bluntly, in the Pacific, the Buffalo was utterly outclassed. It was an over-engineered, burdened fighter that was simply not up to the task, and the results were a heartbreakingly lopsided series of defeats at Wake Island and in the Dutch East Indies. But hold that thought, because there's something truly extraordinary happening at this very moment. While American pilots are facing a near-certain death in the Pacific, halfway across the world, a version of this same plane is on its way to becoming an unparalleled legend. It's a twist of fate so profound it forces us to re-examine everything we think we know about military aircraft. Because now, let's shift our focus to the brutal, frozen skies over Finland. Here, the Finns were flying a much lighter, leaner export version called the B-239. It lacked the heavy armor and self-sealing tanks that plagued the American model, and it was a completely different aircraft because of it. And in the hands of the Finnish Air Force, their version of the Buffalo became a legend, especially against the Soviet Union's outdated, but numerically superior aircraft. They faced the Polikarpov I-16, a rugged but slow fighter, and the Lag-3, a tricky opponent with its own flaws. On this front, the Buffalo's respectable climb rate became a decisive tactical asset. The Finns perfected what is known as boom and zoom tactics, a style of aerial combat that emphasized speed and altitude over turning ability. They would use their superior vertical performance to gain an altitude advantage, then dive from above to make a quick, lethal pass on their opponents before zooming back up to safety. This was a direct contrast to the turning dogfights the American pilots were forced into in the Pacific, and it perfectly exploited the Buffalo's strengths while avoiding its weaknesses. The Finnish pilots knew they couldn't outturn a Soviet biplane or a nimble I-16, so they simply never tried. They used gravity and speed as their primary weapons. But performance figures on paper mean little without reliability on the front line. And this is where the Finns truly excelled. Their meticulous maintenance, cold weather modifications, and ingenious winterized engines meant their planes could start reliably in sub-zero temperatures. The Finnish ground crews were nothing short of brilliant. They developed methods to keep the engines warm overnight, sometimes using portable heaters or insulated blankets, and they used special, low-viscosity oils that wouldn't freeze in the brutal cold. Reinforced landing gear was a necessity for the rough, unimproved airfields they operated from, a testament to their practicality and resourcefulness. This level of dedication and engineering foresight gave them a level of serviceability that Soviet pilots could only dream of. The result? Finnish Buffaloes could fly more daily missions, negating Soviet numerical superiority and keeping their handful of aircraft in the fight. And then there is the critical factor of the man in the cockpit. Finnish pilots were the products of a more rigorous training doctrine, entering combat with over 160 hours of flight time. They had been trained not just to fly, but to fight, By contrast, their Soviet adversaries were often thrown into the fray with as little as 40 hours of flight time, often with little more than takeoff and landing practice. That experience gap was immense. Fresh Soviet pilots were barely airworthy. Many took to the skies with little to no real air combat skills. They were unprepared, and they were fighting against a highly trained, highly motivated, and highly effective force.